Okay.
Perfect. Okay. Welcome into Four More Pages. I am joined by Zak Podmore. And Zak, you are a journalist and you are an author. And so tell me how you came to kind of, get into journalism and being an author.
Yeah, thanks for having me on the show. Good to be here. I kind of got into journalism actually through the Colorado River, not the Colorado River in Texas, but the Colorado River that goes from Colorado down to California and Mexico. Um, and I right after I graduated from college, I didn't have a journalism degree, but I went on a trip with my friend, a kayaking trip from the headwaters of the Colorado River on the Green River in Wyoming down to where the Colorado River dries up in Mexico. So it was a 4 month trip um, where we saw the river start out as a little creek and then grow into a big river and then shrink back down to a creek before it dried up completely. And just for trying to tell the story of what we experienced on that trip, um, led me to start to do journalism, which I didn't really expect to do. But we were, blogging, making videos along the way, and in order to understand why a river as big as the Colorado River dries up, you have to, understand the history of water development in the Southwest, water policy, and anyone who starts to tell that story starts to do a little bit of journalism. From there, I got actual journalism jobs at first at Canoe and Kayak magazine, and then later at the Salt Lake Tribune, which is the biggest newspaper in Utah, which is where I live.
Perfect. And so your book, Life After Deadpool, Lake Powell's Last Days and the Rebirth of the Colorado River, you published this book in August of 2024. And so for you, what was that process like of, writing down all of your thoughts and putting pen to paper and kind of bringing this story to life?
Yeah. So this is my second book. The first one was just a book of essays that were related to rivers in the Southwest, but um, from it had varying themes, and this one was a much more uh, coherent book project from the beginning. So I started writing this book in 2021. Lake Powell, which is in southern Utah and northern Arizona, and is the second largest reservoir in the United States, was at record low levels in 2021 when I started writing the book. Those That record low level was broken in 2022 and 2023, and now we're heading back for to break the record yet again, possibly by next year. So it's Lake Powell, which is created by the Glen Canyon Dam on the Colorado River, is the center of the water crisis in the southwestern United States. Um, it's a really famous dam because it was controversial when it was built in the 1950s and 60s because it flooded a place that was as beautiful as the Grand Canyon, a place called Glen Canyon that would almost certainly be a national park today had this dam not been built that flooded 186 miles of the Colorado River. So the book is an exploration of why Lake Powell has gotten as low as it has, but also how this canyon called Glen Canyon is coming back to life as Lake Powell shrinks. So there is 100,000 acres of land in just beautiful southern Utah red rock canyons. Just what comes to mind when you think about if you've heard of Moab or Arches National Park or Zion National Park, just that the beautiful geology of southern Utah was under this reservoir for decades and decades. But as Lake Powell has shrunk to record low levels, um, these canyons and arches and waterfalls and pools have reemerged, and the ecology is recovering really quickly. So it's a book that touches on the history of dam construction on the Colorado River, but it really focuses on what happens when you flood a landscape with water and then allow that landscape to start to recover, which is what we're seeing on Lake Powell.
Perfect. And so you had, first hand experience being out there. And so when people pick up this book and they're reading it and they're going through it, what are some takeaways that you hope that people will take with them, long after they finish reading your book?
I hope that people will um, feel more connected to whatever river is in their backyard or is providing their water supply. The Colorado River supplies water to 40 million people from Colorado and Wyoming down to Los Angeles and San Diego and Phoenix and Las Vegas. So it's about 1/10 of all Americans get water from the Colorado River. So if people are, one of that, a member of that group, I hope they feel more connected to their water supply. But if you're the other 90% of Americans, you get Colorado River water in your wintertime produce, which is most of which is grown with Colorado River water in Southern California and Arizona. Um, or you're getting your water from some other stream, of course, or groundwater, whatever it is. So I think there's a lot of um, people, enjoy rivers, whether it's a park along a river or a trail, or if they're uh, floating down a river in a boat or fishing. And it's trying to think about how water is used both ecologically and for recreation and in homes and for industry, and how all of that fits together, I think helps us get a better understanding of where we live. But unlike most water stories that you often hear, I think what drew me to writing this book and what I think is unique about the story of what's unfolding in Glen Canyon right now is that um, it's a hopeful story ecologically because and recreationally because um, this landscape that was considered to be lost in its original form when it was flooded in the 1960s and 70s is healing very quickly. And I think that is a lesson also for people who live anywhere, that places that we consider to be heavily altered or even destroyed in some cases um, can experience pretty remarkable recovery if we give those places a chance. So I hope those are some of the takeaways from the book.
And so, you've mentioned just how many people are impacted by this body of water. And so it's something that it definitely does impact everyone, whether you realize it or not. And so, when it comes to water scarcity, what are some, things that you hope people will kind of, think about the next time, they're thinking of where their water is coming from and how they're using the water that they are kind of using in their house and in their place of work and things like that.
Yeah, I think it's kind of incredible to study the Colorado River system. It supplies water, as I said, to 40 million people across 7 states and 2 countries. And it's not a very big river. And 40 million people are able to get some or all of their water supply from the Colorado River. And that only uses about 20% of the water that's in the Colorado River. The remainder, or vast majority of the remainder, goes to agriculture. Um, so I think it's important to be aware of, if you live in a dry place like I do in southern Utah, it's important to be aware of water use, especially outdoor water use is by far the biggest residential use of water in the Colorado River Basin. If you have a lawn, you're going to use far more water than somebody who has a xeriscaped front yard like we see in the desert with native plants that take less water. And brushing your teeth, turning the water off when you brush your teeth isn't. You should do that. You shouldn't waste water, of course, but it's really a drop in a huge river system compared to something like lawns, and especially to agriculture, where a lot of dairy and beef is supplied with hay grown with Colorado River water. And then a lot of that hay is exported even to places like Saudi Arabia and China and Japan to feed to cows there. So it's an I don't want to be like, make it sound like there's any part of the book that's scolding people for
Yeah.
taking a shower for a little longer than you need to, or something like that. It's looking at the complicated system and I think if there's one thing we should change in the Colorado River Basin, it would be probably being stop exporting our hay, which is basically exporting our water abroad until we can figure out what's going on and what the best use of that water is.
And I think that this book, it connected with the people here in the Texas Panhandle because, agriculture is a big thing and, water and a drought, that's something that people are constantly worried about in this area. And so it's interesting to, put things into perspective of, yes, this is something that this area struggles with, but in other parts of the country, people are also struggling with this. And so, you are coming to the Texas Panhandle. And so for you, when you come here and you get to talk to people who have read your work and you get to talk to people who they really do care about water and making sure that we have this good supply long term, what do you hope that they take away from you coming here and from your work, once they get to meet you in person and kind of see what you experienced?
Yeah, I hope that people feel connected to their food supply, and if they're not a farmer directly, and to their water supply and to their rivers and the important ecological functions that rivers play into their groundwater. It's an issue that, as you said, is a important everywhere. And if you're living in any dry place in this country, especially from the Texas Panhandle to southern Utah to southern California. And I think we hear, I mean, I didn't want to make it sound like I was anti-agriculture
Yeah.
either. I'm just remarking on how, incredible it is that this one small river in my part of the country can supply water to millions and millions of people and also be such a critical part of our food supply in the Southwest and nationwide with wintertime produce. So I hope just people start to think as I did as I went through the process of writing this book about how rivers connect us, how water connects us, and how it can, in one place, a drop of water in a stream can provide habitat for wild animals and wildlife and native plants and just a thriving, rich desert ecosystem. And then that same drop of water can travel downstream and go through a house and be used in a shower or toilet or dishwater or whatever it is, and then it could be treated and sent back into the river, and that same drop of water could end up in irrigating a field and supplying lettuce to somewhere thousands of miles away. So I think if you can make connections like that to the water in your own backyard, I think it's something that I've found rewarding, and I hope other people would too if they can advance that.
And so you won the 2025 Bonnie McDonald Award for Outstanding Western Book from the Center for the Study of American West at WT. And so, how did you kind of get connected with WT to even be considered with this, being, in Utah and kind of, connecting with Canyon, Texas?
Um, I do not have a good answer for you there. I'm not sure exactly how this happened, but I'm very honored to have received this award from WT. And I've there's been so many great books that have won this award in the past, and it's incredibly humbling to be among those other authors now. So I'm glad that the award committee at the university, recognized that there were themes explored in this book that were relevant, as you mentioned, to the Texas Panhandle and to the water issues that people are experiencing outside the Colorado River Basin. So I'm looking forward to visiting Canyon, Texas in the near future and speaking more about this topic.
And so, as you kind of prepare to make your trip out here to speak about this, what are some, I guess, how are you preparing for it? Because, you've talked about how this kind of came to be. You were just out and you started blogging, and, it went from, being a journalist to being an author, and now you are both. And so, as you prepare for this next thing and coming out here and sharing more about your work, how are you preparing for that?
I think Well, I'm looking forward to learning more about the similarities between the river and water issues in the Texas Panhandle to the issues that I explore in the book. Um, but I think the presentation I'm going to give at the university is going to be, focused on the research that I did in the book, and focused on Colorado River in southern Utah, history and issues and scientific research that's going on in Glen Canyon and in Lake Powell. Um, so I'm putting together a bunch of images that I took while I was reporting this book, that show the themes that I've been talking about, how Lake Powell is shrinking, but how the ecology is recovering as well. And then I'll get into the water politics and history, and looking forward to discussing all of that with folks in Texas.
And so, as you were, writing this book and going through the research process, was there anything that, really stood out to you, maybe that, you learned along the way that you maybe hadn't expected, or you were kind of just like, this is interesting to see how these two things connect?
Yeah. So I grew up running rivers in Utah, talking multi-day rafting trips through canyon country, in mostly the southern part of the state. It's incredible experience. People are where you can raft through the Grand Canyon, but there's also all sorts of other river trips in southern Utah that offer a similar experience, where you can spend days, go for tens or hundreds of miles, and camp out on the beaches, all on public, mostly BLM, or Bureau of Land Management or National Park Service land. Um, and so that's what I grew up doing, what I really loved as a kid, and I still enjoy those experiences now. But if you've spent any time in that culture, you've heard the story of Glen Canyon, that was drowned under Lake Powell in the 1960s, and what a incredible world-class river trip that would have been, had it not been flooded by Lake Powell. What was lost under Lake Powell, became an incredible world-class houseboat and reservoir recreation destination, and that's how it's often experienced today. And millions of people enjoy those activities each year. But the history of the river that was flooded is also very famous. So I grown up hearing about that, and what I was most surprised about writing this book is that this reservoir seems to be, well, it's not as needed, for one, as it was initially thought to be when it was built. It's causing a lot of problems for water delivery in the Colorado River basin. And so I was surprised to learn that this place that I thought would be there for many hundreds of years, Lake Powell, was shrinking very rapidly. It hasn't been full since 1999, and it's about to reach a point on the back of the dam where water releases become very difficult, through the Grand Canyon and to the millions and millions of people that rely on that water downstream from the Glen Canyon Dam. So I think there's a good chance that the dam might have to be re-engineered, modified in some fashion in the near future. And if that happens, this canyon landscape will continue to come back to life. So it was surprising to learn about all of that, because I kind of thought I knew this area well. I thought I knew the history well, and I was shocked to learn just how close we are to needing to overhaul water management in the Colorado River system, and the good news that's already occurring ecologically in Glen Canyon itself.
And so you mentioned how you grew up in this area, and so this is a big part of your childhood. And so to see the changes, from a child to an adult, what has that been like to experience that, as an author, and to be able to put those thoughts, in a book of like, this is what's happening, this is kind of why it's happening, and this is what could happen in the future.
Yeah, I think it's uh, I'm very lucky to have been able to start out doing these fun river trips as a kid, and then be able to make water reporting and water journalism a big part of my career since then, which has led to not only getting to enjoy these canyons in southern Utah, but also learn about the scientific research that's happening there, learn about water policy, and learn about these issues that we've been talking about. So I think most surprising for me, if I could go back and talk to myself as a kid, would be to learn that I've been able to write books about this topic and not just enjoy the time out there. And I think in terms of what's changed, I grew up in the 90s when Lake Powell was full for the last time, and at that point, it seemed like things were working more or less as intended with the Glen Canyon Dam. It was producing a lot of hydropower. It was storing a bunch of water. It was providing this great place to do reservoir recreation in the southern Utah landscape. And there were some, people, activists calling for the lake to be emptied because of the memory of what was lost under Lake Powell. But those voices weren't, taken very seriously because the Glen Canyon Dam seemed like it was serving its intended function. But that started to change, in the year 2000, and now it's been 25 years since Lake Powell was full. We've been in 25 years of drought in the Southwest, probably similar to what you've been experiencing in the Texas Panhandle. It's moved from just drought now to what climate scientists call mega drought, and it's basically a permanent aridification, or more or less permanent. There's the leading climate models show that we're not going to get a return to the water flows we had in the last century anytime soon, or that's unlikely. The Colorado River has declined by around 20%. Its average annual flows compared to the 20th century, and that's pushed the water system to close to a breaking point. So more and more there's discussion about what needs to be done in the Southwest to reduce water use and to balance the system to make it more sustainable, because we have been using more water than actually exists for a while, but we're getting close to the point where we can't keep doing that because we don't have any more water in reserves in these reservoirs. So it's an interesting time to look at all of this, and what I was glad to see in the book is that there's some bright spots too. It's not all doom and gloom because of what's happening with the rebirth of Glen Canyon.
And so before we wrap things up, is there anything else that you would like to, share with our viewers who, maybe they're interested in learning about water scarcity and how all of it works? And, what would you say to our viewers and listeners who want to learn more about this?
Well, pick up the book. That's welcome to do that. Also, come out and visit us in southern Utah, or go to the Grand Canyon and look down at the Colorado River there. And I hear that the second largest canyon in the country, by some estimates, is outside of Canyon, Texas. Largest, I guess, would be the Grand Canyon, and the Colorado River flows through that right after it comes out of Lake Powell in the Glen Canyon Dam. So I don't, but I think more than anything else, it's kind of what I was saying earlier about, I hope people find ways to enjoy the water, the rivers, the lakes in their backyard, but also think about those connections between water use and water enjoyment in their area.
And where all can people purchase your book?
The book's available anywhere books are sold. Any of the big bookseller sites, or requested at your local library, or find it at your local bookstore, or I mean, order it through your local bookstore.
Perfect. Well, Zach, I appreciate you so much for being here with me today. It was great getting to talk to you, and we're looking forward to having you here in the Texas Panhandle coming up really soon.
Yeah, I'll be at the university on December 11th. That's at 6 p.m. At the library. So, well, thank you so much for having me on the show. Great talking to you too, and I appreciate you taking the time.
Of course. Thank you.